Good morning, everyone. This is Jeff with Walk and Talk with Jeff. It's a brutal, humid, rainy Saturday morning here, and I wanted to tell you a story. This one's going to be a gory story about an inmate who lost his eyes. And I don't mean his eyesight, I mean he lost his eyes. Let me set the stage. We were standing out on the yard one day, and this was a fairly new penitentiary, and it was a high-medium joint. And for some reason, the upper management decided we did not need a fence around that yard just exactly yet. So we had a wide open yard that connected directly to all the cell houses. Well, we all went to yard, the unit that was supposed to go to yard that day. And we were all standing out there doing our yard duty and watching and making sure everybody was behaving. And I get this call on the radio for me to come to the unit. Well, the officer that called me to come to the unit was an officer who very rarely calls to come to the unit, because he was one of the guys who took care of business. Basically, he took care of his own affairs, so you didn't have to worry about it too much. And when he called for help, you knew you better go, because something most likely was going on. I was standing there next to another lieutenant. I said, I'm going to go check it out because he never calls. So when I got to the unit, there was a lot of scrambling going on. There was people running all around the cell house. And I looked up, and there was a lot of activity on the upper deck on the right-hand side in one of the wings. So I had the officer pop the door, went in with the other lieutenant. We walked down there, and they were escorting this inmate down the steps. This inmate was bleeding, looked like, from his face, holding his head down, and the officer had a bucket. And I thought, I didn't understand the bucket part, but the guy's head was leaning down into a bucket. They escorted him down to the foyer area there, got it out, and when he looked up, he was, of course, screaming in pain. And there was 2 holes there where his eyes used to be. I said, oh my gosh. I said, what happened? And the officer said, well, I'm not real sure. He said, just another inmate had told me that there was a disturbance up there in the cell. I went and checked it out, and this is what I found. So I did some investigating. I went up there, and there was another guy sitting in the cell that the inmate that we escorted out. That was not his cell. I said, what are you doing in here? He's nothing, man, just chilling. Looked down on the floor, and on a pencil was an eyeball. He had actually penetrated the eye in this guy's skull and pulled it out, and it was laying on the floor, stuck to a pencil. Kind of made me a little sick to my stomach. Had never seen anything like that before. So I said, what happened in here? He said, I don't know, man. He said, the guy started some crap, and I finished it. I said, oh, you did, huh? I said, what happened? He said, man, we were just up here just drinking a little hooch. And he was drunk. You could tell he was highly intoxicated. Apparently the other guy was too. He said, we was just up here drinking some hooch, and he got mouthy. He said, I told him to shut up, and he didn't shut up. He said, so I stuck him. I said, what do you mean you stuck him? He said, I stuck him. He said, I took his eyes. He said, he can't talk like that. He said, I couldn't kill him. He said, but I took his eyes. I said, oh, that was smart. So as we walked on, so I cuffed him at that point, and I was walking him down the steps, and the other officer said, hey, Lou, he said, I don't know what you do about this, but he said, his other eye is laying in here on the floor. He said, it's got a huge hole in it. He said, I don't even know what to do with anything like that. And I said, well, honestly, I don't either. So one of the officers, it was so frantic, and people couldn't really figure out what to do, because this was all new to everyone. He grabs a cup, pours some milk in it from the chow hall that he had saved earlier, poured it in there, and put the eye in the milk. I said, why did you do that, man? He said, well, I think that's what you're supposed to do to something in it, to preserve it. I said, no, that's a tooth. You put a tooth in milk. But anyway, that was just people just not thinking straight, not thinking clearly, because obviously that's, you know, that's just a crazy thing that you know, that you see. So anyway, as the story goes on, I get the guy cuffed who committed the assault. And as I cuffed him, took him down the steps, I took him outside. The thing that you have to realize about penitentiaries and prisons, inmates know things before officers know things. Everybody on the yard already knew what happened. What we didn't know at that time was that each inmate that was in the altercation were from rival gangs. Not good. The other lieutenant and myself walked this guy out in handcuffs. In the meantime, the medical staff was tending to the guy that actually had no eyes left. As we was walking the guy out, the yard people's on the yard all started walking towards me and this lieutenant, just walking towards us. I told him, I said, this is not good. I called the tower, which had a direct view of the sidewalk. And I called the tower and I said, hey, I said, watch our backs. I said, we're on our way to segregation with one. I said, lock and load, because we could be in trouble here. And they started walking a little faster towards us. I happened to notice two guys that I knew was pretty high in the gangs. I saw them. And I told the other lieutenant, I said, we're not going to outrun them to segregation. I said, I got to talk to these guys. He said, man, are you sure? I said, yeah. I said, hold him right here. Don't have him look at nobody. Turn his face away from everybody. And you kind of stand in between you and you stand in between them. He said, all right, man. He said, I hope you know what you're doing. I said, I hope I do too. So I called both guys. They're both from rival gangs. I called them both over there. And I'm talking about 300 to 400 inmates standing back there behind them, all looking at me talking to these two guys. I told the guy, I said, hey, I said, I got it under control. I said, you know me, and you know I'm going to take care of business, and whatever happened, I'm going to get to the bottom of it, and I'm going to make sure that whatever happens, it all gets handled correctly. And I told the other guy the very same thing. The other guy of the gang, he was standing there too. I told him at the same time, I said, you guys need to tell your people to go out there and have your yard, and let's not make this a great big deal, because we do not want to be on lockdown for the next month and a half. And so they kind of looked at each other, and the one guy, the guy that, if I can word this correctly, he's the guy that got his eyes stabbed out. The gang leader for his side said, he said, you gonna take care of it, Lou? He said, because if you don't, we are. I said, listen, man, I said, I told you I'll take care of it, and I'm going to. After about a couple minutes of him discussing it with his people, he decided that, he looked at me, he said, you handle it, Lou, I trust you. Which made me have a great big sigh of relief, because I wasn't real sure how that was all going to go down. The other guy, that the guy had done the stabbing, his gang chief said, do what you got to do, Lou. So we walked the guy on to segregation without incident, thank goodness. The tower man was within seconds of firing shots, and it got that close. Now, the inmate who got his eyes stabbed out, he was taken to the hospital that day. We never saw him again. He was flown to some kind of a special center, I guess, to get all that taken care of. But I have to tell you, in my career in corrections, that was one of the most gory scenes I've ever seen in my life. There is things that are in behind the eye that comes out that you have no idea what it looks like, and I wouldn't want anyone to ever even see it. But anyway, that's what happened. It was a terrible thing. It was as gory as could be. The officers did an outstanding job that day. The tower man did an outstanding job, and thank goodness that the two gangbangers, the two leaders, had a level head at that time. Shortly after that incident, that center, that prison, we put fences around the yard. Day late and a dollar short, I always say, but at least it did happen. So anyway, I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll be back and tell you some more stories. And please like, subscribe, and comment on my page. I'm out.